Welcome to today's edition of Weathering the Storms of Life with the Rangers. Here as we start another week with our little quiz programs. Rob Rains, STLSportspage.com, Sally Tippett Rains here as well. Also put these up on our rainbowsforkids.org site, so hopefully you'll be enjoying them. We kind of went through the decades of from the 1970s to the 2010s last week, so we've got to come up with a new topic today. But before we get started, some words of wisdom as we get the new week started.
My words of wisdom for today are be flexible. Two easy words. When I was in college, I
Important.
pledged the Kappa Delta sorority, and we were the first pledge class, and we were the first ever class. So
At the University of Missouri.
at the University of Missouri, so nobody knew what they were doing, and so the wonderful alums who helped us start it gave us those words of wisdom: be flexible, and it's been the best advice I've had throughout my life because. For instance, during this virus, yesterday on Mother's Day, it's a simple thing. My kids would come over and see me, those who live in town. But couldn't do that because of the social distancing, so we had made the plan to have a picnic outside. Well, then it turns out it's freezing out there, so be flexible. We made a little fire pit, and it was, it turned out to be really nice, but you can still have a lot of fun, but it doesn't have to have the same expectations that don't put tough expectations on yourself all the time.
Good
Just
advice.
go with the flow.
Good advice, especially now. All right, so I mentioned we're going to come up with some different topics for quizzes for this week, and for the first 3 days of this week, we're going to go through the three different stadiums that the Cardinals have played in since 1920. Busch Stadium 1, of course, known as Sportsman's Park before it changed the name. Then Busch Stadium 2, and then of course the current park, Busch Stadium 3. So today's questions will all be about Sportsman's Park, aka Busch Stadium 1. So hopefully you will do well on those quizzes with 10 questions. Then we'll go through all the questions, then come back and give you the answers. So you play along at home on a piece of paper, or just think if you know the answers out loud as we go through them.
I want to say hi to all the Cardinals fans who are women, by the way. Yesterday was Mother's Day, and everybody was saying Happy Mother's Day, and I say that to you also. But happy Amazing Women Day to all the women out there, whether you're a mother or not. You all had mothers. You might have wished you were a mother or want to be a mother, but we're all amazing. So let's all celebrate ourselves any way we are.
And we do know there's a lot of female Cardinal fans out
That's
there.
why I said that. We have a lot of female Cardinal fans, and I think that's great.
Yeah,
Knowledgeable female
that's
Cardinal
true. They're
fans,
probably going to
too.
go 10 for 10 on these questions. So you can get it started.
All right, question one. What year did Busch Stadium number 1 close and Busch Stadium 2 open?
Mm-hmm.
Busch Stadium 1, what is that a
Sportsman's Park.
question?
Sportsman's
Park, yeah.
Yeah.
All
Same,
right.
same stadium. Same stadium, just going by different names.
Well, I just thought I'd clarify that.
Question 2. What were the two streets that intersected at the site of Busch Stadium 1, aka Sportsman's Park, and what is located now at that intersection, at that location? Where was the location of Busch Stadium 1, Sportsman's Park, and what facility is now on the grounds of that stadium?
Number 3. When August Busch bought the Cardinals and decided to change the name of the park from Sportsman's Park, what was the original name he wanted to use as the stadium's name?
Mm-hmm.
What was the original name that August Busch wanted to call the stadium?
Mm-hmm. Question 4. When the Cardinals and Browns met in the All St. Louis World Series in 1944 at Sportsman's Park, what nickname was given to that series? What was the nickname that they called that All St. Louis World Series of 1944?
Question 5. For a long time, Sportsman's Park was the home of two major league teams, the Browns and the Cardinals. For how many years was it the home park for both teams at the same time?
Mm-hmm. Correct. Question 6. One of the most famous plays in the stadium's history of Sportsman's Park occurred in the 1946 World Series, Game 7. Enos Slaughter scored from first base on a single in the 8th inning, Game 7, that gave the Cardinals the victory. He gets all the credit for scoring from first on that single, but who got the hit? Who was the batter who got the hit that drove in Enos Slaughter on his mad dash, Game 7 of the 1946 World Series?
And if there are some people out there doing this quiz that don't know any of the answers, don't feel bad because I actually covered the Cardinals for a few years in there, and I consider myself a somewhat knowledgeable person, but I don't know very much about old Sportsman's Park and about various times like that. I think we can just all learn a little bit about that.
I went to one game there.
You did?
My first game as first Major League game I attended in person was at Sportsman's Park, Busch Stadium, 1964. My mom brought my brother and I up from Springfield on the train for a weekend in town. We had various things to do. She wanted to go to the Muni. My brother wanted to go to the planetarium. I wanted to go to the ball game. So we got to do all those things. But what I remember most about game, not who won or who lost, but the fact that my favorite player growing up as a kid, as we've mentioned before, was Kenny Boyer. I was all excited to see him play. Got there, walked in the stadium, had our ticket, paid my dime, I think it was, to buy the scorecard so I could keep score. Had the starting lineups pre-printed in the lineup card as they did back then. Ken Boyer was not in the starting lineup.
Oh, that
Now,
stinks.
no offense to Phil Gagliano, who I do know is a great guy, passed away unfortunately years ago, but I didn't want to see Phil Gagliano play third base that day.
You
I
wanted
wanted
to see your
Kenny
hero.
Boyer, and he wasn't
Yeah.
there. So that's why I could always, every time people say that about current day players, and it was true when Albert Pujols was here, it's true of Yadier Molina, anytime they got a day off, I know there's somebody out there who was planning on seeing him play his first game, 8-year-old kid, and he wasn't in the lineup.
Oh, that's
So,
a shame. Well, that's cool you actually got to go because
I
it's
don't
kind of one of
really
those
remember-
mythical places.
That's really all I remember about it,
but
honestly.
still, you can always say you went there.
I know that was my first game.
That's pretty cool. Question 7. Another famous moment came during a Browns game in the 1951 season when Bill Veeck decided to have a midget pinch hit. Not sure if they call them that anymore, but a midget pinch hit during a game as a publicity stunt. What was this person's name?
Small person. If you want to
I
call
know,
him
but
that.
I'm just saying they did call him that
I
back
know.
then.
I know. 1951.
Yes.
All right. And question 8, in Game 7 of the 1964 World Series at Sportsman's Park, Busch Stadium, between the Cardinals and the Yankees, two brothers played against each other. Actually, both hit a home run in that game. So who hit the two home runs, the two brothers who had a home run in Game 7, one for the Yankees, one for the Cardinals, in Game 7 of the 1964 World Series?
Question 9. Why did the move from Busch Stadium 1 to Busch Stadium 2 occur in May instead of the start of the 1966 season?
Okay. And question 10, at the time that Busch Stadium 1 closed in May of 1966, that 4 other Major League stadiums were home to teams that are still playing in those stadiums today. Who are the 4 teams, the 4 stadiums that were in use before the Cardinals moved into Busch Stadium 2 in 1966 that are still in use as Major League stadiums today?
Yeah, so today are the questions about basically about Old Sportsman's Park,
We'll
and
go
then
on to Busch Stadium 2 tomorrow and Busch Stadium 3 on Wednesday.
okay. So
I don't know
in
what we'll
some
do on
memories
Thursday
about
and
Sportsman's Park, can you tell a little bit about the Knothole Gang?
Yeah, that was they had a hole in the fence basically, and people who didn't afford to get a ticket to the games were able to go and stand outside the stadium, kind of peer in through that little hole and watch at least part of the game.
And I've met so many people, and haven't you, that have said I was part of that Knothole Gang.
Yeah, it was a different era back then for sure. So, all right, on to the answers here for today's quiz then. Question 1.
All right, the first year Busch Stadium 1 closed and Busch Stadium 2 open was 1966.
So we actually gave you that answer if you didn't know it at the time of question 1 by a couple of the other questions that we had later on in the quiz. I just realized that.
All right. Well, at the time
So
you were
shoulda
taking
got-
the questions.
shoulda
No,
won.
they
at least
should.
one for 10 if nothing else. Okay. The 2 streets where that stadium intersected were, of course, Grand and Dotier in North St. Louis. It's now the site of the Herbert Hoover Boys and Girls Club.
Number 3, August.
I
Oh,
want to
you
interrupt. Before the Cardinals moved into the Sportsman's Park, they played at a place called Robinson Field, which was also located in North St. Louis. And when it was torn down and the Cardinals moved into this stadium, that land became Beaumont High School. Just another little
yeah.
oddity. So mention that.
Okay.
Question
Okay.
3.
August Busch wanted to name the stadium Budweiser Stadium.
And at the time, Major League Baseball rejected his request because they said it could not be named for a commercial entity. It could only be named, for a person. So he named it Busch
Nice.
Stadium after himself.
Very tricky.
What happened the next year? They came out with a new brand of beer called Busch Beer.
Oh, they didn't have Busch
No,
beer.
it
Oh,
did
isn't
not.
that something?
Did not. It came out a year later after he had already named the
Very
stadium
savvy.
Busch Stadium.
Very savvy company owner and team owner.
Of course, now they don't have that restriction. There's a corporate
Sure.
name on every stadium in the country. Okay, question 4. The nickname of the All St. Louis World Series in 1944 was the Streetcar Series, named so called because of the streetcar that ran up and down Grand Avenue.
Number 5, for a long time, Sportsman's Park was the home of 2 Major League teams, the Browns and the Cardinals. For how many years was it the home park for both teams? 33 from 1920 through 1953 when the Browns moved to Baltimore. Wow, that's so long.
And for a long part of that period of time before August Busch bought the Cardinals, the Browns owned the stadium. The Cardinals were the tenant, not the owner of the stadium. But it flipped when he bought that team. So.
There's still a lot of people today that remember the Browns, and there's
Oh,
a
yeah.
really big fan club.
They do have a big fan club. Ed Wheatley is very much in charge of that, and Bill Horst is involved, I believe. So yeah, they're still very active on things. There's few former Browns players still with us. So question 6. Of course, they became the Orioles when they moved to Baltimore. And the interesting thing about the Orioles is they were supposed to be in St. Louis to play the home opener this year in April, but obviously that got canceled because of the pandemic. So. Question 6, the most famous plays, one of the most famous plays, probably the most famous play in Sportsman's Park history was Enos Slaughter's Mad Dash, Game 7 of the 1946 World Series. Who got the hit that drove him in? It was Harry the Hat Walker.
Question 7. Another famous moment came during a Browns game in the 1951 season when Bill Veeck decided to have a midget, what they called them at the time, pinch hit during a game as a publicity stunt. What was his name? It was Eddie Goodell.
Mm-hmm. Drew a walk on 4 pitches.
Eddie Goodell even made that song,
Mm-hmm.
the Terry Cashman's Talking Baseball.
Mm-hmm. Did. Famous play. Question 8, Game 7 of the 1964 World Series, continuing on with the World Series tradition. Cardinals and the Yankees met. 2 brothers both hit home runs in that game, one for the Yankees, one for the Cardinals. Who were they? They were, of course, Ken Boyer and Clete Boyer. Both played third base, actually, together.
Why did you like Kenny Boyer so much?
Well, he was the best player back then. He was the MVP in '64. I don't know. Just small-town Missouri kid from Alba, Missouri, and down in southwest Missouri. I was in
He
Springfield.
was.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So just,
That's probably why.
yeah, no really special reason other than that that I remember.
At the time Busch won closed on May of 1966, 4 other Major League Baseball stadiums.
No, you skipped one. You skipped question 9.
Okay, question 9. Good, because 10 is too long.
I'll take care of that.
Question 9. Why did the move from Busch Stadium 1 to Busch Stadium 2 happen in May instead of at the start of the season? It was because construction delays kept the new stadium from being finished until May.
So they had to start the season in the old ballpark. Luckily for them, they hadn't torn it down yet. So they
that had to have been a nightmare for like the ticket people. They already sold the tickets. I don't know how it went back then, but as of now, you would have sold the tickets. So then you had to
I don't know how far in
change the
advance they
tickets
found
or
out
what.
that they weren't going to be able to open the season in that new stadium. I don't remember that part of the story. So.
Be flexible. That was
There you go.
their attitude back there.
Absolutely. And question 10. At the time that Busch Stadium 1, Sportsman's Park, closed in May of 1966, they moved downtown. There were 4 other stadiums that were in operation hosting Major League Baseball teams that are still in operation today. 2 of them I know you got are very obvious. It's Fenway Park and Wrigley Field. Third one, of course, is Dodger Stadium, which opened a few years before that. And the fourth one is kind of a surprise. It's Angel Stadium in Anaheim. They actually also opened in 1966, but they opened in April of '66. So they started playing games there about 3 weeks or so before the Cardinals moved into Busch 2.
Oh, one of the biggest memories, it's not a memory to me, I just see it in pictures, but is that all the men wore hats. You see pictures.
And coats and
coats and ties. And I guess it was before they started all the MLB, apparel and stuff, because you never see any of the pictures with people with baseball clothes on. Of course, now everybody's...
And they were also day games for the most part, too. They didn't play the first night game until 1940. And
so they were dressed. You think they were dressed up from coming from work?
Well, I think that's probably part of it, but also it's just tradition. I mean, it was just people dressed up back then. It was different era, different. They dressed up for everything. Airplanes.
We should find out when the first baseball
theater.
Hats started coming across. Maybe it was in Busch Stadium.
I also have a theory that it wasn't as hot back then, because if you were wearing a coat and tie and going to a baseball game, you'd be kind of warm.
Yes, that would be.
I'm glad they changed that tradition. I've never
You
been.
wouldn't like
I've never
covering the
been a
team.
fan of coats and
No,
ties. No,
not at
so. They tried to put a dress code on us at USA Today one time that said we had to dress up like that, and it lasted about 2 weeks. Not to say that I was the ringleader for getting rid of it, but it may or may not have happened. So that's today's quiz show on the 1960s and the Sportsman's Park move to Busch Stadium 2. We'll be back with more tomorrow here on Busch Stadium 2 here on STLSportsPage.com, also rainbowsforkids.org.